After many ups and downs, and will he, won't he, US President Joe Biden has finally taken himself out of the running in the 2024 US presidential race. Biden has endorsed his Vice President Kamala Harris as the new Democrat presidential candidate after announcing his decision to drop out. But he cannot personally appoint a Democratic nominee to fill his spot in the presidential race. The candidate will be chosen through a vote by the delegates to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago that begins on the 19th of August. As of now, most Democrats and former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton have also backed Biden's choice, while others like former President Barack Obama and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi have not. So with Joe Biden stepping down this late to the presidential election, will it impact the Democratic Party's chances? Also, other than Kamala Harris, names like Michelle Obama, Senator Joe Manchin are also doing the rounds. Is Kamala Harris the best suited to take on Donald Trump? To understand that, we have a couple of very special guests joining us. We have with us Ambassador Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the US. Thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. And we have Dr. Vineet Prakash, Associate Professor, Center for US and Latin American Studies at JNU, joining us. Thank you, Dr. Vineet Prakash, for being with us. I'm going to begin by asking Ambassador Meera Shankar a very simple, straightforward question. Pulling out is one thing. Pulling out so late is a huge headache for the Democratic Party. One, to find the other candidate, and two is how do you mount an opposition to a rampaging Donald Trump?
Well, I think Biden stepping down is the first step. And now there's a pretty difficult path for the Democrats because of the shortage of time. Whoever becomes the candidate will have hardly any time to campaign before the presidential election, while Trump has had a long lead time in the campaign. Also, the downswing in the polls for the Democratic presidential candidate after Biden's poor performance in the presidential debate is something that will have to be overcome. I suppose the plus for them is that voters are very keenly divided. Those who are Trump followers, those who oppose Trump and are with the Democrats, and they really haven't shifted that much. I think what is at stake is the center, the independents or undecided voters who have not made up their mind which way they are going to swing. So in that sense, because you already have a band of committed voters, which is quite large, I suppose it becomes less onerous now to try and build a campaign. But I think the important thing for the Democratic Party is their great worry was that if Biden continues, they will not only lose the presidential race, but also the elections to the House and the Senate, which would then remove all checks and balances for Trump. I think that was their great worry, and that perhaps will recede somewhat now that Biden has stepped down.
Dr. Vineet Prakash, my question to you would be this. History is being made one way or the other. Never before in America's history has a presidential candidate dropped out so late in the race. And his choice of successor, which is Vice President Kamala Harris, if she goes on to win, she will be the first woman president in America's 248-year history. My question to you is, at this stage, how strong do you see the chances of Kamala Harris, Biden's choice, being the actual candidate? Because she's got a lot of endorsements from senior Democrats, but then some marquee names like Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi are yet to give their consent for her. What do you think are the chances of Kamala Harris becoming the Democrat presidential candidate?
She stands a pretty good chance, and depending on whether she's able to receive endorsements from all other senior party members, as well as she needs to win the delegates required for getting the party nomination. So once that part is done, the other part would be campaigning, and for that she has a very short time span, considering the elections are less than, say, 107 days away. So that is going to be one challenge. And what is going to work in her favor is the fact that she is already part of the government. She is already part of the present administration. So the good work which this administration has done, the positives which were going for Biden Harris, should automatically translate into Harris and whosoever is going to be with her on the ticket as the vice president nominee. So that advantage is going to work in her favor. Secondly, Harris as a presidential candidate is still untested because she was so far, up to this point, she was the vice presidential candidate. So it remains to be seen whether she is able to generate the kind of momentum which is required for winning the election. So that also remains to be seen.
Ambassador Meera Shankar, my question to you would be that it's not like Kamala Harris is a completely new face. I mean, she did, campaign to become. Original plan was to become the Democrat nominee in the U.S. presidential race. That didn't materialize. She's a known face. She's not a complete stranger. She has spoken to the public enough about her policies, and she has her own voter base as well. So, in that sense, does Kamala Harris come with some work that's done already that can make it easy for Democrats to sort of push her into being the presidential candidate?
Look, I think the Biden administration's record during Biden's presidential term has been good. As the previous speaker said, as far as the economy is concerned, they've been the best performing developed economy, very robust growth rates, unemployment at lowest levels. Of course, there have been concerns about inflation and consequently of the high interest rates, which were increased by the Fed. But inflation seems to be now moderating. Secondly, Biden has done well on climate change, where he has articulated a pretty strong position and has also made resources available for green technologies, though perhaps not to the extent that he initially desired because of Republican opposition in the House. Thirdly, he has stabilized and solidified America's alliances and built institutional mechanisms to pursue America's foreign policy, both in the Indo-Pacific as well as in Europe. The alliance with NATO has been strengthened. And in the Indo-Pacific, you have the Quad, you have the, Australia, UK, US, AUKUS, and you have the South Korea, Japan, US trilateral. You have a fresh defense agreement with Philippines. So overall, I would say that Biden has done well. But I think we have had differences with Biden on Ukraine, where I think Trump might follow a more pragmatic policy and seek perhaps to end the conflict and to negotiate. On other issues such as trade, Trump would obviously be more difficult for India. He's promising a 10% tariff across the board on all imports to the US, a 60% tariff on imports from China. Plus, with NATO, again, some of his statements have been pretty wild, though he's tried to walk back from them thereafter, saying, no, basically my concern is that NATO should pay its fair share. And similarly, you have his recent statement on Taiwan, where he says Taiwan should pay the US for defending it, and so on. So it's a more transactional, more unpredictable approach, which would would require some adjustment by the world.
I'm going to ask the question on Kamala Harris specifically to Dr. Vineet Prakash. One is the fact that she'll be, she's right now seems like the most obvious choice or the most preferred choice of the Democrats to lead the Democrats in the upcoming US presidential elections. But I want you to help us understand, do you think that with Kamala Harris in place, it'll be a tougher race for Trump? Because Trump has totally dismissed it, saying the fact that, if it's going to be Kamala Harris, she's going to be easier to defeat. But there is analysis now that's coming out saying the fact that actually will give a Trump a run for his money.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's not going to be an easy election for either of the candidates, depending if Kamala Harris is able to win the nomination finally. So Trump is also, it's not going to be a cakewalk for him. And the fact that Biden's record, Biden administration's record, that is going to work in Harris's favor. So that thing is for sure. Secondly, what I believe, Harris coming into the campaign as a presidential candidate is going to mobilize more enthusiasm among Democratic supporters, as well as the younger voters, the undecided voters. They might be more inclined to vote in favor of a younger candidate. So that also might work in favor of Harris. So I would say it's going to be a very even competition. It's not going to be lopsided as the Trump campaign would want us to imagine and think.
Okay, Ambassador Meera Shankar, if I were to ask you the same question, between Biden and Trump, it looked like Trump was winning everything. But do you think that with now Kamala Harris in place, she'll be able to give a tougher fight?
Yes, I think that it'll be a tougher fight because, as I said, voters on both the sides are very firmly entrenched in their position. So those who are Democratic supporters definitely want to defeat Trump. Those who are Trump supporters definitely want to defeat the Democrats. They are very well entrenched in their positions. The fight is really about the undecided voter in the middle who might swing. And Kamala Harris has the advantage of having been a part of the Biden administration and a familiar face. She has the disadvantage that the US till now has not been prepared to elect a woman, much less a woman of color. So we have to see whether this is something she can overcome. But because she's a woman, it may be an advantage in mobilizing women on the Roe v. Wade controversy and the rolling back of abortion rights. Secondly, she does command the support of the Black caucus, the African American community, and possibly she might also get support from some of the South Asian communities and maybe Hispanics. So, the question is, will the white male voter vote for her? I think that is going to be the constituency that she has to work to win over.
Dr. Vineet Prakash, my question to you at this stage would be, it's a wild card question. From the time that the US presidential race began, there was always the question of, Michelle Obama. Should she have been in this race or not? At this stage, what do you think are the chances of something like that happening?
In my opinion, the chances for that would be very rare because it would make the process much more complicated for the Democratic Party. If Harris goes on to become the nominee, then all the resources which Biden-Harris campaign has generated so far would smoothly transfer over to the Harris campaign. So, secondly, Michelle Obama has no background of running for an office so far. In comparison, Harris has that advantage of running for an office. She was the prosecutor in California. Secondly, she was a senator. Then she was also the vice president, and she has conducted a national level campaign. So in that sense, if you have to choose between Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris, then definitely Harris would have an advantage. And I have a strong feeling that during the convention, Democratic convention, the delegates are going to swing in favor of Harris. So as of now, this is what I would like to say.
Okay.
Rest would depend on the actual convention.
Ambassador Meera Shankar, quick take from you on Michelle Obama.
Look, Michelle Obama would have been a good candidate. She's very popular. But as mentioned, she has no previous experience of government, and that would be a handicap. Secondly, she herself has repeatedly said that she is not interested in politics. So the question is, would she be interested? And at this late stage, I think the Democratic Party is going to try to select a candidate by consensus rather than engage in a, very stiff competition for the post of candidate for president.
Okay. Okay. We will leave it at that. Dr. Vineet Prakash, Associate Professor, Center for US and Latin American Studies at JNU. Thank you so much for taking time out with us. And then, of course, Ambassador Meera Shankar, former Indian Ambassador to the US. Thank you, both of you, for taking time out to be with us here on the News 9 Plus show.